Hi, my name is Ann Kostecki, and today I will be doing this watercolor forest tutorial. This painting is monochromatic and I use a dark blue, but you can use any dark color to accomplish this. I'm using my Viviva watercolor sketchbook too for this project. The first step that I do is wet the paper with my large flat brush. Then I blur the horizon line with the brush. Using a different round brush, I start to mark out the front part of my landscape. This particular one has a river, so I'm painting around the river and just painting the foreground. You can also use masking fluid if you want to get a nice crisp edge on your river. My next step is to use my flat brush to paint out where the dark forest is going to go, and I usually use a very diluted color to kind of mark out where I want the dark trees of the forest to go. There's no particular place you have to put the trees. You can just kind of eyeball it where you want the dark trees to go. I swish my brush from left to right when I want to give that tree look, and it's kind of indistinct branch look. It's important to have really nice wet background where the trees are nice and blurry so that it creates the illusion of depth. The darkest shapes should be in the foreground, and so I keep this in mind when I'm painting. Sometimes I have issues where the brush strokes are super visible, which I know a lot of people have trouble with in watercolor. And usually what I try to do is to make sure that my paper is wet and my brush is wet, and I lift my brush as little as possible from my paper. I try to keep everything in one smooth stroke. Another thing I try to do is to mark out where the tree details will go. I use the tip of my brush and draw like the outline of the tree and then blur it a little bit like you see here. And this tells me for the future where I want the tree to be. The next step is I take a very wet brush and I paint out a darker sky. I like the effect of having the darkness right at the edge. So as you see here, I'm just pushing the water with my brush. And here next I am using my small round brush to create more of the leaf branches on the tree and create the tree shape. This will be a common theme in this forest is I will do many layers of tree branch shapes. And keep in mind, trees are usually way wider at the bottom than they are at the top. So I make this like pyramid or triangle shape when I'm doing trees like this. The brush I'm using is a Princeton Aqua Elite round brush number 16, and that is really good for doing these tree brush strokes. This is mostly a monochromatic painting, but you don't have to do your painting like this. I liked the way this looked, and I kept it simple, and I think it helps it. I think I used a little bit of a lighter blue just to give a little bit of contrast, but you can do this completely monochromatic, or you can mix colors, whatever you want. You can also create interesting textures with the branch by using different parts of your brush, like the tip or the back of the brush, and using different types of brush strokes. I really like experimenting with that. It feels more real to give the tree lots of different texture. Another fun trick I like to use is use a spray bottle to keep your paint wet. This makes it a lot easier. Now on for the tree trunks. I know it is hard keeping those tree trunks straight, but keep in mind that tree trunks are not always straight in nature. So I like to just try to brace my hand a little bit so that they're mostly straight, but not like pencil straight. I like to leave a little bit of an opening for the trunk of the tree, as you can see on this tree on the left, so that you can kind of get like more of a contrast between the lights and the darks. And of course, if you use a very small brush, you can get a lot of intricate detail on your tree leaves. Like as you can see on the top here, there's a lot more contrast in brush strokes. Now you can see that I'm getting a lot darker and I'm adding a lot more layers, and this creates that depth I was talking about earlier. You can always add more pigment to your brush and test it on watercolor paper that's scrap paper or a paper towel to make sure it's the right darkness before you paint on your painting. And this particular painting has kind of a misty wood by the ground, so I'm kind of having it fade into the horizon line. And now I'm going back and forth over my trees, deciding where the darkest parts need to be. And on the far left side, I've kept it light, and then it's a lot darker on the far right side. And this can be a fun therapeutic process to just do these very similar brush strokes back and forth, and You can see all of the depth it creates. And now the real challenge is to get a super dark pigment color for the far right side of the painting. If you ever struggle with getting your pigment super dark, you can always add its opposite color and then you'll get a darker shade of it. And now the next step comes to add some branches to the base of your tree. You don't have to add too many, just enough to evoke that forest feeling. I always say resist the urge to do too many in the first step. Just kind of do a couple and see if you need to add more later. Okay, now we're going to start focusing on the foreground. I'm adding more layers close to the river area. This is where I add a second blue color. If you're thinking about adding another color for contrast, this is a good spot, or you don't have to. You can paint some waves or some shadows in your river area. You can also add some rocks into your river. I'm adding some darker rocks here. And you can just use your smaller brush to get in some more details, like I'm adding a little tree in the front and some more smaller rocks. This brush is a 000 brush and is very tiny, so if you don't have one of those, then you can skip this part and just use the smallest brush you have to add little grass strokes if you want, or some more details in the foreground. You can always use a little bit of white gouache too if your really dark paint kind of gets in the way. I'm adding a little bit of white gouache here to highlight some water spray by the rocks, but you don't have to do this if you don't want to. White gouache also has a tendency to kind of bleed into other colors. And so I'm adding some final touches, some very dark plants right in the corner, in the closest to the viewer area. I'm painting some round leaves or some like fern-like plants. A few more tiny rocks and some water details, and I'm finished. I hope you had a lot of fun with this.